the recording lady.
All right.
So,
Well, it's good to see you, Cornell and Bobbie. I don't remember the year either, Cornell, but it was at Unity where I first met, when I met you and I met ChiSing. And my favorite thing about ChiSing is his playfulness. I remember him being just really encouraged me to come back. I probably felt like I was too busy to be coming to meditation each week, but I felt very much included or wanted or cared for in the sangha and by ChiSing. All week, all the stories of the time I knew him, and the stories from his life always. One of my favorite stories he told me about is pushing his dad around in the wheelchair and zooming him around in their yard, or I don't know if it was the yard or the driveway, till it's zooming his dad around in circles till he was laughing. His dad had had a stroke and didn't speak anymore. But I think that sums up who I really think of ChiSing as, is that person who could bring out the joy in life, bring out joy for the people he loved. And he seemed to love everybody most of the time. So I think that one of the beautiful things about ChiSing for me is that he was very much a human being. He had all kinds of quirks and foibles and human beingness that sometimes got hung up on what ideal spiritual practice looked like. And he was perfect. Just like that, he was perfect. He had a plan. We came up with a plan to start a mindfulness home. And so he rented one of my bedrooms upstairs, and Dan rented the other bedroom upstairs, and we would have meditation practice, a meditation hour together in the morning and in the evening. And I don't know, it seems like that lasted 3 or 4 months, and then he moved back to his family's home. But when he got sick, I always felt so honored when he asked me to drive him. When he would ask me to bring him to the meditation center or to drive him home afterwards. It was really a sacred gift to be with him in during that time. The message that he left me with in his life was, other than his playfulness and his persistent pursuit of mindfulness, was that you could have pain and not suffer. I felt like there was some insight he got through cancer, was that he was in pain, but he saw clearly that that didn't mean he had to suffer. And still, whenever I sit in meditation, I visualize him sitting across from me. And I wish we had many recordings of just his voice singing. His voice, he was just so a bodhisattva, I guess, just an angelic voice. I love him very much. I'm grateful to be asked to tell a story or two about him. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And I guess before I should have said this already, but I'll do it now. What we'll do, Liz had shared some. I'll share a bit, and then Bobbie will share. But afterwards, Bobbie will probably invite you to ask questions if you have questions about Brother ChiSing, and then after that there will be refreshments and some finger foods out there where we can do more sharing of stories and stuff. So just wanted to mention that earlier. Yeah. So I'll talk a bit about Liz. We might ask you a few more questions too, but yeah, I'll talk a bit about when I met ChiSing and maybe a little bit about his history before then. And this would be prior to the meditation center, those years that I worked with him. Our community, Awakening Heart Community of Mindful Living, predates the Dallas Meditation Center by about 4 years. And I met ChiSing in, I think it was winter solstice 2006. There used to be some of you may remember the winter solstice celebration. Every year there was a summer celebration and a winter celebration. It was about a 2-hour program of music and ritual, and there'd be about 800 people or so in attendance. And in 2006, I was asked to play flute before and after a Buddhist guided meditation. And so I said, sure. And we talked about what I would play before and after. And the director said, yeah, that's good. And then she sent me the biography of the person who would be offering the meditation. And so that's all I saw. I saw a name and a biography. And I saw a biography of 2 master's degrees and being ordained in 2 different spiritual communities. And looking at his resume and all of the spiritual communities he formed, looking at that, not knowing who I was meeting, I was looking for someone who looked probably about retirement age or something. And it's like, I don't know who I'm looking for, but anyway, then someone came up and talked to me, and that photo that's over there on the right, that was a few years after I met him, and he always looked so young. And when he started talking to me, it's like, you have 2 master's degrees, you look about the age to be starting college or a freshman or sophomore in college. So anyway, it was like, so that was the first surprise in meeting him. And then the next one was, I'd gotten the instruction from the director that I'd play the piece after and piece before the meditation and the meditation again. But somehow ChiSing had a different idea and started telling me things like, I'm going to say this, then you should play that, then I'm going to say this, and then if you'll play something like that, I said, hold on. This isn't the same agenda that I got. Anyway, and then he came back and said, oh, you have something that you wanted to do? So, that's what I'm here for. Anyway, so it went as I had planned at that time. So I did my piece, and he did his the guided meditation, which probably ran about 20 minutes longer than what he was asked to do. And then when I played out, after that, he asked me, would you come play for our Thursday meditation group? We're having our winter solstice celebration that night. And I said, sure. And so I went, and it was really nice. We met that group was meeting in the clubhouse of an apartment complex. And I went and played music, and then he and I went to TGI Fridays afterwards and sat and chatted. And then ChiSing always had some sort of ideas or always something to engage people. And I don't remember if it was that night or probably wasn't. It was probably, he probably called me the next morning with his idea. And that was, would you, I'm going to teach a meditation class that is 3 weeks long, and it will start in January. Would you come play music there and maybe help me organize it? And I said, sure, that'd be no problem. 3 evenings, got it. So anyway, we did that. But then I think it was on the 3rd week, he said, and next week we are going to have a Lunar New Year celebration. And this will be the start of our Sunday meditation group. So I signed up to show up at your Thursday night event, and then 3 weeks and now somehow we're doing this. Anyway, it was a wonderful event that we hosted. That week after, we had probably 4 or 5 ministers from the area who came and spoke, welcoming this new community that was starting, and probably 8 musicians or something to bring it in. And so that 3-week class, that was January of 2007, and right now it's March of 2023, and I'm still here. But anyway, so that's one of the stories of ChiSing, and there's, I think that engagement of people was a really strong suit that he had, and that charisma that he had to attract people to attend and join and check things out, and to give mindfulness a try, just give it a taste. A little bit of history about him. He was born in 1969 in Houston, and then went to school here around Dallas. His family had commercial real estate business, and some of what I'll tell is what he had shared with me, and some of this will be what I guessed, so it might not be totally correct. But from what he had told me, I think he was destined from a pretty young age to be a Baptist minister, and so that's what he went to school to do. Prior to coming to Dallas, he had been in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, where he had, I don't know if Bobbie's going to mention any of that, but he did several things. But one of the things that he started was a meditation group there, a meditation sangha. And he always talked to me about how different it was being in San Francisco versus here for this type of gathering, or this type of community. And his sangha in San Francisco had probably about 100 to 120 people weekly. And so he always wished that the group in Dallas could be that big. But then he said, well, maybe Dallas needs it more. That's what the difference is, and they'll come find it. So he'd started that community before moving to Dallas. I think he came to Dallas in 2005. And I think he received his ordination in 2004 from TikTok, I think. And so he came here in 2006. Our Sunday group, which is still meeting now after those 3 classes that we did, that I signed up for, we've been meeting continually since then. That's our group here. The class was called Breath of Life. Our Thursday group was Awakening Heart, but then the Awakening Heart community of mindful living was the group that encompassed all of us. And over the years, those 4 years in there that we were meeting prior to Dallas Meditation Center, we met at, I'll say that meditation class. So we met at, let me speak one sentence at a time. We met at Cathedral of Hope, and then later we met there. We alternated between there and any of you remember the Cosmic Cafe? And the other group was still meeting at the clubhouse near Walnut Hill and 75, the one I initially came to. And then over time, we moved to Unity Church of Dallas. And then we also had a group meeting at the Korean Zen Temple, Bohyun Temple, near Richland College. And we also met in some homes and a frame shop. So we had all these communities everywhere. And a little bit about the formation of the Awakening Heart Community of Mindful Living and those three classes I signed up for. If you've ever read the wording on the back of the program, that you get a bit of a hint of this. ChiSing's ministry, he focused a lot on reaching people who may have felt rejected from their spiritual communities that they grew up in. And so that was a lot of the piece of meeting at Cathedral of Hope. And even though this wasn't specifically an LGBTQ focus group, that is primarily who he advertised to, because so many folks have been rejected from their spiritual community. And so that was a big part of the formation of the group. And so our advertising, he would advertise through several of the metaphysical communities like Center for Spiritual Living, or the liberal Christian churches like Unity and some other independent Protestant communities. And then also through Unitarian churches. But a lot of his advertising went out through the bulletin boards along Cedar Springs and the Voice, the Dallas Voice, the LGBTQ newspaper. And so that's where a lot of the foundation of this group came from. But there's that big emphasis on reaching those people who may have felt put aside or rejected, and probably some things Bobbie would say might share some of that. But, anyway, a few things, and I'll wrap up here. Just a few more stories from me. One of the most fun afternoons that I had was, and this is something ChiSing would do, he always was looking for activities for people to get together. And this particular afternoon, it was for some of the members of our Awakening Heart community, as well as the Sunim Bokjun from the Korean Zen Temple, and also some of the teenagers from the teenage group at the Korean Zen Center. We all took a field trip to the Dallas Aquarium. And, nothing real special, but it was just a really good afternoon, and we got some photos of us in the aquarium. And sometimes I run across those photos of the teenagers, ChiSing and Bokjun, walking around the aquarium. So I thought that was a really, really nice example of some of the things that he would do. And maybe that's enough for now. I might think of something else, but I'll turn over to Bobbie.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. I didn't meet ChiSing until about 2010. By that time, he had gotten a facility that was big enough to have offices and a pretty big meditation hall, almost as big as this one. And this was a building that his family had used for real estate. It was their offices, and they moved their offices, so we got to rent their space, that old space. And so they were renovating, painting, taking down walls, all kinds of stuff. I got involved from a friend who asked me if I wanted to come help paint this new meditation center. And I said, well, yeah, sure. So I went and I helped paint the meditation hall. ChiSing was in another room, which we called the Lotus Room, and we have another Lotus Room here. Donna said, oh, you need to meet ChiSing, please, come on, I want you to meet ChiSing. So we went into the Lotus room and Donna introduced us and ChiSing said, hi, how are you? Thanks for helping. And then he went back to painting. And I'm like, okay, what was the big deal about meeting this guy? So that was pretty much it. Until then, I went to a meditation workshop, which would have been probably in the next year. And on the way in, now some of you have already heard this story, so I apologize if you have, but on the way in, I saw a sign on the door outside of the building that said, personal assistant wanted $1,000 a month. And by that time I had retired from teaching and I didn't really have much else to do. So I thought, oh, that would be good. That would be good. I'd like to do that. So after the workshop, I said to him, I'm interested in that job. And he said, well, I really can't afford to pay anybody. And my first thought was, well, why did you advertise it so prominently? So anyway, I thought about it a little bit and finally I said, well, what if I volunteer for 2 weeks? And if I like being here and if you like having me here, then, we'll work something out. And of course, that was good, a volunteer. So I started in and not knowing anything about what was expected. I was, it was just, I would sit in the office, answer the phone. And it didn't take too long for me to kind of get an understanding, a read on him. Interestingly, he was the same age as my daughter. So I felt a little bit like a mother, I felt a little bit maternal toward him. And so I put up with some of the foibles that, that Liz mentioned, just because, I thought of him like a son. But anyway, after 2 weeks, he came into the office and said, I can pay you. I can pay you next month. All right, so that was it. And then, so I've been involved since then, since 2011. Just some quick fun stories. The first year that I was working there, we organized a trip to Magnolia Grove. We rented a couple of vans and signed people up, and we drove 9 hours. I think it took us 11 because we stopped and, everybody had to get something at the convenience store. Anyway, we finally got to Magnolia Grove and discovered that ChiSing had really not registered to go to the retreat. So he ended up sleeping in one of the vans, which he was fine with, I guess. He never complained about it. So that's true. I also heard, although I don't know if this is true, when he was ordained into the Order of Inner Beings, you're supposed to get one of these brown jackets. Most people get it ahead of time. They even have it made or they buy it or something. But of course, ChiSing didn't buy one. He didn't have one, and he was about to be ordained. And so the person who was telling me this story said he mentioned to one of the monks that he didn't have a jacket, and this monk found one for him. Just how you need one, here you go. That was kind of the way things happened for him. He could simply manifest things. I think because he just believed that everything was okay most of the time. But then, there were I think one of the things I've been thinking about most lately is the grace with which he faced his illness. And I think he was kind of prepared for that because of the suffering that he'd already been through. Cornell mentioned that ChiSing was meant to be and wanted to be, apparently, a Baptist minister. He went to Baylor and he was youth director in the church that he was attending there. And I'm assuming that he felt comfortable. He felt like he was loved and supported there. And so at one service, he told the community that he was gay. And they turned him out. They told him he'd have to leave, and if he ever changed his sinful ways, he could come back. So I don't know, he never talked about this, although, you know, it's obvious that what Cornell said about the intention to include everybody, and especially people that had been kind of rejected or harmed by their religious, whatever it was. So he had already had that kind of experience. And like Liz said, he must have at some point learned how to suffer with, or to, what am I trying to say, mitigate the suffering from any kind of harm or pain. And so I think he did the last couple of years very gracefully. I know he was in pain, but it didn't stop him until the very end. And the last sangha that he was with us was at CSL, because we hadn't got this place yet. That's a whole nother story. But so we were meeting at CSL because the building we were in had been sold, and we were kind of homeless while we looked for a new place. And in that last meeting, that last sangha, somebody drove him. He arrived in a wheelchair. He managed to sit on the stage, and he talked about sangha. He talks about how important sangha is. And that's about all I remember about that talk, but he just said it over and over, you know, don't let yourself get away from sangha. The sangha is your life, it's your support, it's anyway, he was very, very adamant that we should keep the sangha alive. I do want to tell about, since I'm on this track, about the end. During the last several months, I don't know, maybe even a year, maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Cornell, but he was kind of, he wasn't bedridden exactly, but he didn't go out much. And so Cornell and I and some other friends would go to his apartment and sit with him, and also beginning to pack things up. He must have had, I don't know, a couple of thousand books and just about that many CDs. Anyway, so we started packing books and CDs and just visiting with him. The last few weeks, he was not in his apartment anymore. He had moved into his parents' house and into one of the bedrooms. So I want to talk about the last time I saw him. And I'm going to try to do it without weeping. So I had been there in the afternoon, and ChiSing was watching some TV show. It's like it was so I don't know. It's like a little soap opera kind of thing, and I was sitting there thinking, what are we doing? Sitting there watching this silly soap opera. But at one point, finally, he decided he was ready to go to bed. And so his brother carried him to bed. And I want to say that even though his family, especially in the beginning, had been really, really adamant that he go to chemo and do radiation and all of those things, which he didn't want to do, they did finally come around to really supporting him and taking care of him. And so his brother took him to bed. And after he was settled, I went in and he asked me to sing the Medicine Buddha chant to him, one of his favorite chants. So I sang the Medicine Buddha chant a few times until he nodded. That was enough. And then I hugged him and said, see you tomorrow. And that was the last time, because the next morning, he passed away. So the thing that I want to just remember about that is the fact that he was so young, and that he kind of taught me how to make that transition, because he did it so easily. I don't know what was going on in his head. I don't know what was going on, when I wasn't there, but it seemed to me that he made that transition with a lot of grace, and it really helps me to remember that. And to kind of, again, just laugh about some of the things, like taking him shopping. I mean, even if it was Office Depot, he could find a lot of stuff to, we had a list. We'd go in with a list, and before you know it, I didn't even have him anymore. It's like, where did he go? Well, he was going all over the store, finding things that were cool or neat or funny or whatever. I have to tell this one story. One time I asked him if he'd ever been to that store, Home Goods. If you've been there, there's a lot of beautiful stuff in there. So we went, I asked him, and he said, no, he'd never been there. So I took him to Home Goods here in Richardson. And so one of the things they had in there, I don't know what the season was, but they had this giant gorilla, stuffed gorilla. And he had this thing about monkeys. He really liked monkeys. And he just immediately went and just hugged that big old gorilla, which was way bigger than him. And he actually wanted to buy it. But I talked him out of it. Because I didn't think it would fit in my car. Anyway, that's the playfulness, and yeah. So he had all of those qualities. He was sometimes lonely. Yeah. All of that. He is human. I think that's all I want to say. I do want to say, well, first of all, how many of you did not know ChiSing? Just raise your, good grief. Okay, so you may have a lot of questions, I'm hoping you have questions.